Hey, welcome to Purple and Bold podcast from DNR Media and the Daily News Record. I'm Shane Metlin here with Katie Harper to discuss JMU sports. Specifically, going to get into the start of summer fall football camp for JMU football team as we get a look at a pretty rebuilt roster, a brand new coaching staff, and all that stuff. We got some glance in the spring, but now it's maybe feels a little bit more for real, or I don't know. You tell me, Katie. As you got out there for kind of like the intro day and then the first day of camp, where they actually got on the field and started getting to work for preparations for Liberty in a few weeks.
Yeah, the first intro day where we talked with the coordinators and Billy Napier, that honestly, like it felt a little bit like, oh my gosh, we're starting football season again, but it was still, I had sat down with Billy Napier multiple times since the spring, so it still wasn't fully like practice football, but going out there on Wednesday, just kind of walking around and talking with people, I'm like, oh my gosh, we are a month out from covering a football game and having the season get underway, and it feels like so fast. And even talking with some of the guys after, they were all just like, yeah, it comes at you pretty quickly, and all of a sudden we're here and ready to go. And it's, yeah, football season and less than a month out now from that first game.
Yeah, I mean, it really does kind of like, just kind of dawn on you all of a sudden that we are getting ready for football at all levels. When I talk to our boss, like Cody Elliott, sports editor there, and like, he's like all in on getting ready for prep football and everything. It does come at you fast because it's like you said, it's spring, you think you get a little time off, then all of a sudden it's Sunbelt Media Days, and you think, well, but that's still like a few weeks out, and then we're here. And I say preparing for Liberty. We're probably going to talk a little bit about that opener and everything. But I think they're probably also still, you know, there's certainly some game prep, especially in the coaching staff going on. But when they get out there on the field, a lot of it still is that early stuff where they're just like trying to learn what they're supposed to be doing at JMU, right?
Yeah, well, like when we talked to Jacob LaFrance after the first day of practice, he even mentioned that for his role and the player personnel, recruiting department, they're also, while they're still working on recruiting and looking at this next recruiting class that they're going to bring in next year, they're also going to help the coaching staff with some of this early prep on opponents. So they're looking even a few more weeks out. So, those guys are probably already now looking at Liberty, but there is still a lot that needs to be figured out. JMU doesn't necessarily have its starting quarterback. Billy Napier has said that eventually it's going to be whittled down to a two-man race, and then eventually they're going to have their starting quarterback. We have no timeline of when that's going to happen. So all of this right now is still just, trying to piece together what the team is. And I think they're in a good place. Everybody that we talked to after practice on Wednesday said that where they are now is drastically different than where they were even on the last day of spring practices. They all feel like they have a really good understanding of what this team is and what the coaching staff is trying to run both offensively and defensively. And I think some of that is because they had a little bit of a mini camp over 2 weeks where it was kind of just getting that install down and really learning the system a little bit better. But they all seem pretty confident of where they're at, but there's still, steps that need to be taken to be ready for that game against Liberty.
And you mentioned whittling it down to a two-man race before choosing a quarterback. And I know you've really only seen parts of one practice at this point. You know, get out there again this weekend, and we'll see more over the next few weeks. But it does appear to still be truly a three-man race at this point. Would you say?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't been able to see too much of the quarterbacks in like an actual offensive scheme. Like we haven't seen them run too many different things. We've seen some compete periods and some different drills and that stuff, but it's still very much a three-person race. Even Napier said it the other day when he was talking with us in his press conference, but you know, I don't think you can go very long with it being a three-man race. You need to, I would expect, make cuts pretty quickly on who's going to be battling it out for that starting job, and those decisions need to come relatively fast.
Yeah, I mean, you want guys who are going to play to get reps at this point. Like you said, just a month away from playing an actual game, and it's I guess important to note that they did whittle it down from a four-man race at this point, which um, we went into spring, came out of spring really kind of not having any idea which of the four might be leading that. And we've talked before about Davy Belfort moving to wide receiver, but is there anything else that has come out of the quarterback situation so far, or is it really just wait and see for anybody that's not within those walls of the APC?
Yeah, I was asked for my guesstimation on who I thought it was going to be, and I told them, I'm like, I still need like another practice or two to like really see, because even things like I forget, I forget already. I learned this under the Chesney thing and under Chesney's reign, and it maybe I need to unlearn it now, but I don't even remember who was taking snaps from who, because I remember 2 years ago when it was Dylan Morris and Alonzo Barnett, some of us were thinking, well, Dylan Morris is taking snaps from Tanner Morris, and everybody at that point knew that Tanner Morris was the starting center. And so we thought maybe that was like a sign that Dylan Morris was going to be the starter. No, it was Alonzo Barnett, and Alonzo Barnett throughout the season didn't really practice with Tanner Morris at times. Like he was taking snaps from Brett Davis. So even now I'm like, you can't even look at like who's taking snaps from Zach Greenberg. That's not even necessarily going to be a tell-all sign. At least it wasn't with Chesney. So we'll see if it comes to fruition under Napier, if whoever's working with Zach Greenberg is maybe the front runner. But I'm curious to see kind of how that one even plays out.
Yeah, it would hardly be. I mean, especially at the FBS level, it wouldn't really be a JMU football season if we weren't going into it like having these questions about quarterback. I think back to the first FBS season, even though it was like very clear, I think to everyone, Todd Centeio was winning that job. Like they refused to like even make an announcement of a starter until they put it up on the video board. Like when they announced the starters for the games, they didn't have a depth chart at quarterback or anything. And then the following year, Alonzo Barnett beats out Jordan McLeod, and that was kind of a shock to a lot of people. You know, we tried to hint that that was happening, but people didn't believe us. But he gets a start, but then like loses that job. Jordan McLeod goes on, wins Sun Belt Player of the Year and everything. You mentioned Alonzo Barnett, Dylan Morris, not knowing who it's going to be. Really, only last year did we have any kind of like real idea going in.
Still
You know,
didn't, because no one knew what
yeah,
his health status was.
yeah. I mean, yeah, there was that. Like, I mean, we kind of knew if like he was healthy, he was going to play. But yeah, it wouldn't be um, JMU if we weren't talking about who's going to start quarterback at that first game.
Yeah, and it's like I know I see it all the time on social media from different people who follow JMU football that they don't like the gamesmanship, and they're like they want everybody to just come out and say, like, they want Billy Napier to get up there and say, "Hey, this is my starting quarterback." But you're not opening the season against Wagner, where there is a clear difference of talent and skill on the roster. You're opening the season against Liberty, who theoretically should be going pound for pound with you in every single category at every single position. So not giving Jamie Chadwell and Liberty the knowledge beforehand of, hey, it's this guy, that's a benefit to JMU. And I know it bugs some people, but I think it's a very understandable reason why Napier may not end up coming out and saying this is who the starting quarterback is, at least publicly to us. Obviously, I think he's going to say that to his team, but I think it's a very clear reason. There is a very clear reason why they wouldn't necessarily come out and say it, because you want to compete or keep that competitive edge over Jamie Chadwell and Liberty. And I know they're in a similar situation right now too, where they have a little bit of a quarterback battle, even with Ethan Vasco coming back, who started some games for them last year. And it seems the way Jamie Chadwell said it, he may actually come out and say who their starting quarterback is, which could be interesting. I would kind of be shocked, but yeah, if you're in JMU's case, you're not opening the season with an FCS opponent. You're opening it with a fellow group of 6 opponent who there is some bad blood with, regardless of the way you look at it. That head coaches know each other from the past being in the Sun Belt. Players know each other from being from Virginia. You want the competitive edge, and hiding who your quarterback is kind of brings that.
Yeah, and I do wonder too, like when you have to think, like, even looking at this group, sometimes, the team's not going to change a whole lot depending on who the quarterback is. They're going to run the same system or, the same types of plays and things. I wonder how much it could vary for JMU depending on who they end up starting. Obviously, I feel like JC Evans has a much different skill set than Cam Coleman, who is the one guy there's a lot of film on. There's not on Evans or Arrington Maiden, really. I mean, there's a little bit that they could try to go to, but it might be a little bit of a guessing game. Okay, what are they going to try to run? Like, are they going to throw the ball a lot? Are they going to not? Are they going to hand it off? Are they going to run with the quarterback? There's so many different things they could do based on which one of those three guys it is. And I think even that, I think, separates it a little bit than, like, you know, like I said, going back to Alonzo Barnett or Jordan McLeod. Like, Jamie was going to run pretty similar stuff regardless of which one of those two guys it was. Um, might be a little bit different this time.
I still like I don't know how different it will be because I think sometimes you look at like a guy like Camden Coleman and you think of him as a passer. He showed he can run and he's capable of doing that. He did that very well at Richmond. And from what the coaching staff has said about a guy like JC Evans, they do praise his ability, his mobility and his ability to, get out of the pocket and run. But the biggest thing that they've all said dating back to when they came in was how much he's grown as a passer. So I think they really like where he's gotten. And when you look at JMU's offense right now, I think you can't ignore the skill that they have at wide receiver. So I think you're going to see a very strong passing offense, regardless of who ends up as the starting quarterback. Just seeing kind of what has been said about JC Evans. I think Arrington Maiden, I don't know, Arrington Maiden, they haven't maybe necessarily talked about him as much as some of the other guys, but they've really complimented JC Evans' development as a passer. And you compare that with Camden Coleman, who we all know can pass the ball. But I don't know how different it would be in terms of offensive style, depending on who they start at quarterback.
Yeah. When you look at other positions, we're talking about big question marks here. There are a few places where, there's not as many question marks. You mentioned Jack Greenberg at center. He gets some, preseason honors here. Where else do you think the coaching staff feels most comfortable right now after spring and, as they get into camp here?
I think they have to feel pretty confident across the offensive side of the ball. That was something on National Signing Day when you look at the wide receiver position, where Billy Napier said that they probably attacked that position and added more guys than they were expecting to. And I think you have a lot of guys, you have a good mix at wide receiver of guys who have proven themselves at the lower level and are making that jump up to the FBS and hopefully going to see their game transition. You have that mixed with some youth, mixed with some guys that were power four guys who are now coming to JMU, maybe looking for, a fresh start and more opportunity. So they have a really good mix in that group. And I think that's going to be a fun group to watch. You mentioned Zach Greenberg, even though the rest of the offensive line is going to be guys who, have some playing experience, but maybe weren't starters at JMU last year or are transfer additions. They still all have some good skill and some playing experience in the past. So they have a lot of confidence there. Billy Napier even said that to me at Media Day, that he's very confident in that group. The tight ends are interesting. I think I don't know. I'm interested to see the development of the tight end room this year under Napier because, I think back 2 years ago under Bob Chesney in his first season, we all saw Taylor Thompson break out and have a great offensive production. And then last year, you still had Lakota Dupree, but it was a little bit more sporadic when they used the tight end. So I'm curious to see what Napier does. But across the offense, I would say that they're feeling pretty confident. I would say the same on the defensive line. I think that's a group that they're confident in. Linebackers should be solid. I think the secondary is maybe the one area where I don't know if they're going to come out and say they don't feel confident in it, but the secondary is the area where you're going to have guys step up who maybe haven't had a ton of playing experience so far.
You talk about the confidence in both lines, and obviously there's newcomers in a lot of positions of both those. How much is that confidence just based on the sheer size that they went out and got? Like, I
I
mean,
think a
yeah,
lot of it.
yeah,
I just those guys are massive. I mean, even, Dave Riggert with ESPN Radio Harrisonburg, he's doing his player interviews and he's tweeting out photos of him with the guys he's talking to. And he tweeted out the photo yesterday of talking to offensive lineman DJ Fox. And I almost tweeted it and said, like, for anybody who's never met Dave in person, like, I want you to know he's not a short person. Like, Dave is pretty tall and he looked short in that photo because that is how big the offensive and defensive line has gotten at JMU. So I think it's hard to, when you see them, I think it's hard not to be confident that they're going to be able to maybe beat up some of these fellow group of six teams.
yeah. It's funny because like we do this job and we kind of like get a little bit numb to being around large people, like a lot, like tall people and things like that. And then, but every once in a while, somebody will like really be striking you, like, oh, this person is really big for um, a regular human, plus like the positions they play and everything. And there's a lot of those guys like on that football
And I
team. Right?
I will say I said that kind of idea. I said that about JC Evans pretty much like every practice last season. I would kind of joke like, "Oh, looks like JC Evans has gotten taller," because I mean, I think they have him listed at like 6'4" and 3/4. Like he's just under 6'5" on the roster. But he does kind of stand out at the quarterback position when you watch him play. Like he is just a big kid who is durable and can take some of these hits. But yeah, it's some of those things where you look at these guys and you're like, yeah, I know I see you every day, so it's maybe not as surprising to me. But when you get back there for the first practice since like end of April, it's like oh wow, yeah, you are very big.
Yeah, and interesting too how many of these guys who have incredible size are coming from the lower levels, D3, D2 type, move up players who obviously some of them put up huge numbers or, just dominated at that level. Interesting that there's guys that size playing at that level. I think a lot of it probably has to just do with like how weird the last 5 or 6 years have been with COVID and transfers and people having extra years and everything. But yeah, almost a little surprising, yeah, that you're going to find a 6'9" offensive lineman at the D3 level, or these like massive pass rushers at the D2 level and things like that. But they went out and got them.
They did. And I like I said, I think yes, you have to have some athleticism to you to be competitive at this level, but there is still at the group of 5 or group of 6 level, sorry, where there is still a little bit of an edge to someone if they just have the sheer size advantage. There still is that advantage when playing against another offensive line or another defensive line. So I think a lot of the confidence, going back to your original question, does stem from the fact of how big they are in the trenches.
Yeah. Shifted gears a little bit, but something I know you talked to them a little bit over there. The sort of the national picture of things is the 5-and-5 rule. The things that are happening in the courts that really seems to be allowing players who maybe thought that they were out of eligibility to possibly come back or go somewhere else to play. You look across JMU sports. I don't think there's a lot of opportunity for a lot of players to come back. Like there's, we look at basketball, it's just not going to happen. Soccer coaches have talked about like just not really having spots for people, things like that. Obviously, Trent Hendrick puts it out there that he's, interested in coming back. There's maybe a few other guys who could possibly fit that bill. Is that something to pay attention to at all? Is it a possibility? What's going on there?
Yeah, I think it's something you need to pay attention to. I think uh yeah, when I talked to Billy Napier at Sunbelt Media Day about 5-and-5, it was like fresh, like this has just happened. And talking to him, his opinions were more than at that point centered around he still thinks there needs to be the one-time transfer for undergrads, and then once you graduate, then you can transfer again. And then of course, like less than a month later, we're sitting down and being like, well, so technically Trent Hendrick can come back and play another year of college football. The only people I have seen that expressed interest in wanting to return to college football have been Trent Hendrick and Jalen Sanchez. Jacob Thomas, I think he's enjoying life with the Minnesota Vikings right now. I don't think there is a return for him. Same with Mekhi Rogers signing with the Colts. Billy Napier said, when asked, he said that it's something they're monitoring. They're very aware of it. And, Jarvis Heron at WHSV even asked the follow up of, you know, it's at that time it was like what, April 4th or August 4th. He's like, your season is right around the corner. Like, how do you bring someone into this that's new? And Billy Napier's whole thing was, well, the people we would consider, there isn't much of an issue there where we think it would affect the team chemistry, which points to a guy like Trent Hendrick, who was away from campus for a little bit in terms of leading up to pro day and training. He was up in Pennsylvania and Ohio training. But after kind of that pro day, he was at practice a lot. I would be standing next to him, talking with him on the sidelines, watching practice. So he was back. He was around the team. He was popping in on linebacker meetings. So you could assume with what Billy Napier said about there not being a concern about the players they would look at to bring back, that, I think it's lining up that it would be Trent Hendrick. That said, everything is still in the court system. So it's already being challenged by the NCAA. So it's a little hard to tell, is it going to happen? If it does happen, when is it going to happen? So it is a little bit of a complex thing still, but Napier seems very open to it. I think, first year head coach at a program, you would be a little crazy to maybe not consider allowing the former team captain to come back, but should be an interesting one to continue to follow with, how this court system, how the court legal battle plays out, and if it really does open the door for someone like Trent Hendrick to come back.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and shift gears again here because I don't know if people could hear my email ding just a second ago, but this is a little bit of kind of breaking news, like related to football and just like the general JMU is we've talked about Bridgeforth's expansion, what's going to happen around there, where money is going to come from for that. Well, they got a big donation from the Charlie Obaugh Auto Group, Stanton. I mean, if you've ever turned on the radio in the Valley, you know Eric Obaugh's voice, and he's a JMU alum and a pretty big supporter. And it already been, I think, said that the parking garage there next to it was going to have Charlie Obaugh name on there. $500,000 for redeveloping that district around around the Bridgeforth Stadium, the mid-campus district, the villages, dorms, like basically all those brick buildings are gonna go away and look a lot better and like have a lot of different stuff.
Spread the bluestone out everywhere.
Yeah, so that yeah, really just came in, and that is I think a pretty big deal because let's be honest, JMU has a lot of donors. We talked about that recently. That came out recently. They had 12,000, I think, Duke Club donors. Finding the people who can donate, $500,000 or more is the challenge for JMU. And to get one of those donations is a big deal, and possibly sets the tone for other, alums or corporations, businesses around here to like want to get into that. I think it. Without having a chance to really dive into like that press release too much because it really just came in. First impact was okay. We got to talk about this because that was first impression was we got to talk about this because that's a pretty big deal and related to what's happening not just with everything at JMU, but it's going to be directly related to football too.
Yeah, I was like, while you were saying it, I was just thinking about like, JMU doesn't technically have its own Mark Cuban yet. That can just keep a whole coaching staff pretty much intact at like Indiana. But yeah, it is major to be able to get some buy-in. And when you see, how long ago was the parking deck? Within the last week that the parking deck announcement came out, within the last 2 weeks, something like that. I think when you see something like that, you obviously have to hope that there's this person starting to pour some more money into the program, into the university. So that is a big deal to get it on board. And I think, like you said, it inspire and maybe get the ball rolling to get some other, bigger alumni donations to come in.
Yeah, I mean, and I just like, when the Duke Club put out their numbers fairly recently and they had 12,000 donors, it got me curious. I looked up my alma mater, Kansas, and compared it. Like they've got like 6,000 donors to the Williams Fund, but they also have billionaires too, like that are funding a lot of it. And when they want to build a building to house the rules of basketball, like they just do it, and like things like that. JMU has like not had that. So anytime you can get like a $500,000 contribution, that is pretty big. And yeah, I mean, I know they're working on some other stuff too, but the one thing Matt Rowan's talked about is, they want these kinds of sponsorships. They're willing to put people's names on there. They're willing to put companies' names on there, but it's got to be like the good fit. And I would think like um, somebody, like I said, if you're around the valley at all, you know that Eric Obaugh like sponsors about anything that has to do with sports, from like little league baseball to college football. And they're all over. He's a very proud JMU alum. Like he's already sponsored some other stuff. The media room at the AUBC has the Charlie Obaugh Auto Group on there, so it makes a ton of sense. And it's yeah, I think definitely noteworthy to have that happen here while we're recording.
Which, I mean, like, we can transition that into even the other day with the whole, um, creation of travel now and booking. If you book through, JMU's thing, money goes back into their NIL fund. And I know you were working on that story. Has that gone up yet?
I'm not sure. It should be
It
up.
should be up. For listeners
Um,
probably listening to
yeah,
this, Shane has a great story on it, about just even that's a very unique way to get more money kind of back into the athletic department of and how you can, divide that up and get it into the pockets of some of these athletes. It was just a unique one that I don't really think I've seen any other program kind of take that approach of having it where you can book hotels and travel and get the kickback from some money.
yeah. I mean, I looked it up. There are a few. Marshall and Louisiana Tech actually are already involved with the same company, and I think there's a few that like maybe use a different similar company. But I mean, Jimmy's probably one of the first 10 across the country to do it. And like you said, I mean, I just kind of experimented. I was like, okay, say you're going to San Diego for that San Diego State game, and you book a hotel downtown, and like you're probably, you book it for 3 nights, you're probably sending $50 back to JMU, which maybe doesn't seem like a ton right there, but like JMU, like some of these road games, they take 3, 4, 5,000 people on the road. They probably have about that many people come to Harrisonburg and stay the night for a lot of home games. So anytime you're booking that, I mean, if it's 1,000 people sending $50 back to JMU once a week, like throughout the season, like that's probably going to end up being fairly significant.
Well, and I mean, yeah, that goes back to what you hear all the time about, the JMU fans traveling well, and you mentioned it there, but like players and coaches have talked about it where they notice that how well JMU fans travel. I mean, I even think back to the college football playoff, and obviously that's a, unique situation where I think you're going to get more people at Oregon for the college football playoff than you are going to get at, you know, just the Boca Raton Bowl for that, even though, it's probably easier to get to Boca Raton. It's such a unique situation that you're going to get a lot of people in Oregon. But I remember seeing Oregon fans just talk about like JMU fans they were like, this is probably the most away fans we've seen this year. And they were probably the loudest too. Like even Oregon fans took notice of how many people JMU got in the door at Autzen. And I think, like you said, when you actually start to add that up, it is a substantial amount of money.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen how many they take to App State short trip or something, but a lot of them probably stay in a hotel, or maybe they said stay in a hotel instead of an Airbnb this time around because they can contribute to JMU by doing this. And I did have I'll address this like too, like I got so one comment on social media too was like, I hope this isn't a scam like the George Mason basketball thing, which if you weren't familiar with that, they book through a travel agent to go on a foreign trip like a lot of basketball teams will do in the summer, and that travel agent completely scammed them, and they like got to the airport and didn't have tickets or anything that they're supposed to have. This is different. This is basically like booking on Expedia or Priceline. It's just like a different website that is affiliated with JMU, and they, instead of putting those funny gnome commercials on TV. They just send all the money back to JMU that would be for advertising. So that's how that works. And not to completely vouch for people I haven't met personally or anything, but I don't think this is going to be anything quite like that. I think it's just pretty straightforward booking website.
Yeah, and especially if you said like Marshall is involved, I think everybody should be good.
Yeah.
Marshall hasn't backed out of it yet.
Yeah. Well, we'll go ahead with that. We can wrap up, this episode. We'll have plenty of more football stuff to talk about. The JMU basketball teams both wrapped up their summer workouts, and some other sports are going to get started here soon. We'll have soccer teams on the pitch like before we know it. They tend to get started faster than anybody else, and volleyball and all the fall sports. So plenty to talk about, but always going to lead with a lot of football here, leading up to the Liberty game that we hit on, and we can preview Liberty and those other non-conference opponents in the coming weeks. But in the meantime, you've been listening to Purple and Bold podcast from DNR Media. Please search DNR-R Media on wherever you listen to this, YouTube or any podcast carrier, and like, subscribe, all that stuff. And thanks for tuning in.